Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 58, Having His Baby. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Fran's ex-fiance Danny and his wife Heather announce the birth of their very hairy child, Judy, and Fran is forced to grapple with both her unmet expectation of motherhood by this stage in her life and her fear of her eggs expiring the moment she starts to look like her mother. Based on a perfectly timed conversation with movie star Monica Baker, Fran decides that she is ready to have a baby on her own through the use of the sperm bank. She and Val visit the sperm bank, and Fran takes home the donor menu to try picking out the ideal donor. Fran brings her idea to Maxwell, describing her selected donor as 41, tall, dark, handsome, creative, with a big head of hair. And Maxwell immediately assumes that she's talking about him. To avoid having to make a commitment one way or the other, Maxwell tells Sylvia about Fran's plan, and Sylvia does not react well to the news that she's going to be an illegitimate grandmother. Sylvia unsuccessfully tries to convince Fran to change her mind, and then to prove her naysayers wrong, when presented the opportunity to watch Monica Baker's toddler for the day, Fran jumps at the opportunity. The day was one of the best in her life, but it convinced her to wait for Mr. Right before becoming a mother, so that way not only would she have someone to share the precious moments with, but she would also have someone she could hand the baby to and say, "Here, I'm playing Mahjong." Maxwell's relieved, but then hurt when he learns that Fran was not actually going to ask him to contribute the fruit of his looms. Ultimately, she tells him that if he wants to have a baby with her, he's going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. "What, you mean marry you?" "Yeah, that too," she says. Bernadette, would you like to add anything?
Nope, you've got it.
Thank you. Would you like to take us to scene 1 in the foyer?
Yes, so we're in the foyer of the Sheffield residence, and Niles tells Fran that she has some mail. Mail? Who is he? No, mail. Um, he hands her the mail, and she's like, "Oh, I know him, Bill."
Mm-hmm.
But then it turns out that she's actually also gotten in the mail something from Danny, her ex-fiance, and his baby was born. Oh, look at that head of hair. Oh, that's not his head.
Mm-hmm.
And and but regardless of the hairiness of this child, Fran's kind of fawning over it. Niles, doesn't this want to make you have a do you ever want a kid of your own? Someone that you could um rub Vicks vapor rub on at when he's sick, tuck him in. Oh, I already have one. And of course that's when Maxwell walks by. Isn't he adorable?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, it's clear that Fran kind of has baby fever, right? She's like,
Yeah.
it makes me think, if I had stayed with Danny, this could have been my chia pet.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Niles is trying to comfort her. Oh, you have plenty of time. And she's like, well, say that to the expiration date on my eggs. Um, and they're still looking at this little birth announcement. And they finally ask, like, what's his name? Oh, Judy. So
Oh.
this hairy child is a girl, yes. But essentially this scene is just, laying the groundwork for this whole idea of having a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Can you take us to the next scene?
Sure. So we're now in the living room, just slightly over from the foyer, still in the Sheffield home. And Fran is putting together a little gift for the baby. And she explains to Niles that it's a grooming set that she put together. It's got a little comb, a little brush, and an Epi-Lady Junior. And, she comments about how she's just so jealous. And Niles says, "Miss Fine, I can't see why this picture makes you yearn for a child. I could see a lops opso." Um, and, she's like, "Oh, stop it." Maxwell comes in and says to her, "I don't think I tell you often enough what a wonderful job you're doing. And so I've got a little gift certificate here from Saks. I want you to take the afternoon off and have a shopping spree." And so she takes it and she says, "Someone famous coming over this afternoon?" "Uh-huh. Trying to get rid of me?" desperately. Oh, are you still upset about that Charlton Heston thing? I mean, so I went for a lock of his hair. How was I to know the whole thing would come off? Um, so as we know, Maxwell's trying to get rid of her. And so she says to him, basically, don't worry, I'm very busy today. I have to go buy my mother a birthday present, take Brighton to the dentist, pick up tights for Gracie, visit Grandma Yetta at the home. And he's like, okay, good. He starts walking off. And she says, all of which I can do after I meet the famous person.
Mhm.
And the doorbell rings and Fran gets it, and in walks Monica Baker, who in this world is a very famous movie star. Um, and as Fran's greeting her and like welcoming her into the home, Brighton comes down with the phone and he explains to Fran that he's asking Allison to the Thanksgiving Day parade. Does eat dirt and die mean no? And Fran says, oh, give me the phone. She takes the phone. Hi, Allison. I hear you're going to the parade with Johnny Depp. No. Brad Pitt? No. Aren't you being just a bit too cocky? And she like removes the phone from her ear and says to Brighton, she's desperate now. She'll go out with anyone. And Brighton's like, I love you. And she's like, I love you more. And meanwhile, Monica Baker's just been standing there and she's like, did I mention that I'm a famous movie star just standing here like a lump? Fran's like, oh, I'm sorry. And starts like walking her, through the house. And Monica says to her, cute son. Fran's like, oh, he's not my kid. I'm the nanny. If he were my son, he'd have big hair and be a lifetime member of Weight Watchers. And so we learned from Monica that she just left her baby Zach with his nanny. And Fran's like, oh, everybody has a baby. Look, my ex-boyfriend Danny and his wife just had one. She's not breastfeeding. The kid's on a low silicone diet. And Monica looks at the picture and says, isn't it dangerous to have that puppy right on top of the baby? And she realizes it's not a puppy.
Mhm.
And Fran's like, I know. As much as I want to have a kid, something tells me I was better off not dipping into that gene pool. And so Monica explains to her that she went to a sperm bank and, husbands just get in the way of dating big time. And Fran's like, oh no, I don't feel that way. I want to marry a guy, get pregnant, and have someone to blame for making me swell and vomit for 9 months. And Monica's like, yeah, I thought so too, but I wanted to have a baby before I started looking like my mother, which is exactly what Fran just said to Niles. And
Mhm.
Fran like moves over to be close to her. The sperm bank, does it have an express line? Um, and Monica explains that for her donor, she picked a rugged outdoorsman with a passion for dirt biking and fixing cars. Fran's like, oh, do they have any Jewish guys? Because none of those things is affiliated or associated with Jewish men. So yeah. Do you want to add anything?
Mhm. Nope. You
All
got
right.
it.
Would you like to take us to the kitchen?
Yes, so we're in the kitchen and Gracie's standing up on a chair while in front of her Val and like, well, mainly Fran, but Val's there too, is working on something. You can tell at the top of her head she's wearing like a pilgrim outfit. And
Mm-hmm.
she says, did they really wear this? And Fran steps away to reveal that like Grace is wearing a very short version of a pilgrim outfit.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, and Fran explained she didn't get enough material. And so they're like, let's just call you the Mayflower Madame,
Uh-huh.
Madam. Um, and anyway, Val compliments Fran, like, oh, you're sewing costumes. You'll make such a good mother. And this is funny because in the last episode, Gracie kind of did an imitation of Fran.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now she does an imitation of Sylvia.
A
And she
spot on one too.
yes, like adopts Sylvia's voice and tone and says like, "Darling, what does it take to give me just one grandchild?" Morty, put the seat down. I almost fell in. And then she actually then Gracie exits the kitchen at this point, still wearing her pilgrim outfit.
Her abbreviated pilgrim outfit.
Yes. And then Fran's like, "Well, that's the last time I let Ma babysit for her."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyway, I guess, there's been some type of conversation already between Fran and Val about potentially a sperm donor or whatever, because kind of goes into that, I'm shocked And Fran's like, I don't care what people think. Um, and I was probably a product of my artificial insemination because my parents surely have never.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Val's just like, well, I can't tell you what to do. Your body's your own. And Fran's like, yes, it is. Otherwise, um,
I wouldn't need to order takeout.
yeah, exactly. And then Niles, or like, I didn't realize Niles was there until this moment because Fran kind of walks over to him. Niles is kind of near the sink. He has a turkey in front of him, and she asks him, what does he think about her having a baby? And Niles is like, oh, Miss Fine, getting pregnant. I don't know if the world's ready for you in a moo
Mm-hmm.
and she wouldn't wear a moo and her child would come out with a Donna Karen control top.
You're going to be able to read Donna Karen control top over his little forehead.
Yep. So, so then they sit at the table and Val's still trying to talk to Fran about this. Like, you don't understand how it's not so easy, the pain, the suffering, and the possible embarrassment. And this is when Maggie kind of walks in and she's like, oh, are you guys going to a singles bar?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no. Now, this next point needs to, audience needs to know that in the background, Niles is still working on this turkey.
Yep.
Val and Fran are at the kitchen table. And again, Niles has his hand like up the turkey and is kind of like struggling with it a bit.
Yes.
And again, Val's talking about the pain stuff and about the childbirth process. And Fran's like, oh no, like I would just need someone, gentle and sensitive and stuff. And then in the background, you see Niles like smacking the turkey and then grabbing a big pair of scissors to cut into it. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh.
Right. And Niall says, oh, come on, get out of there. Just get.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, as a child, wouldn't necessarily know how that's connected, but
That one I feel is, as a kid, you might understand if you know where babies come from.
yeah, it depends on your age, I would say.
True. Yes. Agreed.
But I also don't know if kids know about like having.
Episiotomies.
Yes, exactly.
Probably not, but I'm sure we could imagine.
Yep. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
The only thing I want to add is that Val says to Fran, "Don't you think people would be a little shocked if you just showed up pregnant?" And her response is, "Yeah, they'd think I had a date."
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she gets into her whole like, "I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I want to have a kid, and I don't know if I'm ever going to meet Mr. Right." So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I'll take us to the sperm bank then.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're now in the sperm bank, and Fran has brought Val along for moral support, I suppose. And Val comments about how it's a weird location for a sperm bank in the middle of a shopping mall. And Fran explains it used to be a Siemens furniture showroom, so they only had to change half the sign. That's something that kids wouldn't understand the difference between semen and semen. Um, anyway, so they come in and the person working there asks, would you like to see the profiles of the gentlemen who contributed? Here's our donor menu. And so she hands Fran a book. It's like a 3-ring binder, probably like an inch thick. Oh, look at the selection. Boy, is everyone in the menu, or do you have something like a catch of the day? And so Fran and Val start flipping through it, and Fran stops at, look at number 64. And Val says, but he's got a weight problem, gastrointestinal abnormalities, and a mother who's certifiably insane. And Fran's like, right, well, I want him to fit in the family. And the person who works there asks, well, do you see anything you like? And Fran's like, well, number 41 looks okay, but I really do need another second. I mean, it takes me half an hour to order from the Dorina Schnitzel. No pun intended. And she and Val laugh, and the person working there looks uncomfortable and suggests, well, maybe you'd like to take this home. And Fred's like, yeah, you're right. This is a big decision. And they start walking, with the book, and they start leaving, and they go into a door. They open the door, and then they shriek. And Fran comes out shielding her eyes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, Val, are you as embarrassed as I, Val? And like we realized that they walked into donor room number 1.
Yep.
So anyway, so Fran had to go grab Val and pull her out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything?
No.
All right. Would you like to take us to the office then?
Yes. So we're at the office. Maxwell's at his desk. Cece is sitting on the couch, and Niles is kind of just up and about. And um, and basically, Maxwell's not in a great mood because he's like, "Are we just not as protected? Everything's down. The sales are down, tickets are down.
Profits are down, ticket sales are down.
And then Niles makes a very pointed look. Well, some figures are increasing because Cece's eating something. But Cece, to her credit, immediately is like, "Listen, Hazel," and like laughs. And then she's like, "Don't you have anything to dust off?" And Niles replies, "How about the left side of your bed?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then at this point, Maxwell's like, "This is why we're not protected. The two of you never shut up." And so they both kind of start leaving the room mumbling about, Niles is saying he doesn't need to be so nasty about it. And then Cece's mumbling, like, "Excuse me for living."
Right.
um, and so they leave, and Maxwell's still at his desk, but Fran walks in, and immediately Maxwell's just like, he doesn't have the time. And again, Fran just ignores this.
Oh, yeah.
Talking, goes, sits on the corner of his desk, and um, and then again, at first Maxwell keeps like trying to get her to go away, but then she says, you know, "What would you say if I wanted to have a baby?" And so that catches his attention, and he yells out, "Niles, hold my calls." Well, actually, he uses the intercom,
Right.
right? Which I feel like was referenced in the previous episode, but this is like the first time I feel like we're actually really using it. Is that accurate, or has this come up before?
I mean, we referenced the intercom before. We will definitely see more of it, but this is, I think, the first time we have like a real, like, something about it
Yeah.
instead of just knowing it exists.
Yes. So Niles hold my calls. Why? And basically, it's none of his business. But then we hear, because obviously Niles and Cece are on the other side. Niles is telling Cece, "We can hear them, but they can't hear us."
Right.
No, they've obviously pressed the wrong thing. And so like they're still trying to work that out. And Maxwell just ends up trying to pull the plug. And
Right.
right before he does, Fran says into the intercom, "It's the red one."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so again, Maxwell unplugs it, and he's like, "What brought this? Like, where's this coming from?" And Fran explains she's wanted to have a baby since Samantha had Tabitha on Bewitched.
Right.
And and again, he's just like, "But what, how?" And she's just like, "It's the 90s. If we can grow a human ear on the back of a mouse, I can grow a baby."
I can have a baby.
Yeah.
All I need is a donor.
A donor, yeah, just the fruit of the fruit of his looms.
Mm-hmm.
um and Max was like, "Well, who exactly?" And this is where kind of the misunderstanding takes place, because as we learned, they were talking at the bank regarding numbers, and
Yep.
there was a mention of I can't talk, sperm donor number 41, but she just says 41, tall, dark, handsome, creative, with a big head of hair. And so, of course, immediately Maxwell thinks she's talking about him.
Right.
And he's kind of taken back, like, "Oh, this is a big decision, gonna give this some thought." And Friend's like, "Oh, yes, yes, yes. You know how much I value your input."
And she touches his leg, like the
Yep.
top part of his leg, and pats his
Yeah.
lap.
Yep. And then she leaves, and Maxwell gets, "What am I gonna do?" And then he goes over to the a back door that leads out to the patio. What am I going to do, Niles? What do you think, Niles? And Niles appears and he's wearing a leaf blower. And Niles again acts innocent. I couldn't hear, sir. And Maxwell's like, it works better if you switch it on. And so
Yep.
then actually turns on the leaf blower and walks, continues to walk.
Hmm.
But yeah, so this is where the central misunderstanding takes place. Um, where Maxwell is assuming that Fran's like in a roundabout way asking him to be the donor. Do you have anything
Correct.
to add to this scene?
I do not.
Okay, take us to the next one then, please.
So we're now outside of Maxwell's office, and Niles is dusting a painting, a portrait on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dusting, and all of a sudden he hears, Niles. And he stops and he looks. He can't figure out where the voice is coming from. And then as he's about to start again, help me. And he's really freaked out because he thinks the portrait is talking to him. And it
Mm-hmm.
turns out it was just not Maxwell in the office. And he's like, oh, darn it, man, just get in here. And Niles is like, don't do that, sir. Don't we have enough scary things roaming around in the corridors? And he gestures at Cece, who's walking by.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so Maxwell's explaining to Niles why he needs help. It looks like Fran is determined to go through with the baby thing, and Maxwell's afraid that she's going to ask him to, as he puts it, assist. And Niles is like, well, what makes you so sure she wants you? And he's like, come on, man. She practically spelled it out. She wants someone tall, handsome, creative. And now it's like, did she also mention cocky, vain, couldn't get the laundry in the hamper if his life depended on it? No. Then what are you worried about? And Maxwell says, well, I'm telling you, she wants me. She wants me real bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to need your help with this. And now it's like, all right, but there better be a big Christmas bonus in my stocking. And clearly he's referring to something that Maxwell was not. Um, and so Maxwell basically was like, okay, let's not panic. Let's not panic. All she needs is someone to sit her down and talk to her calmly and rationally.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything to the scene, or would you like to take us to the calm and rational discussion?
I will take us to the calm and rational discussion because we are now in the living room with Sylvia, who is immediate like, I'll kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because, she can't believe, that Fran didn't tell her she's going to be an illegitimate grandmother.
Yep.
And Niles is there with Maxwell, and so he asks Sylvia, is there anything he can get for her? No, nothing, nothing. Maybe lunch. And so Niles goes off to the kitchen, presumably to prepare some lunch for Sylvia, and Sylvia calls after him, no fish.
Exactly.
So then it's Sylvia and Maxwell, and Sylvia's just going on and on about what a nut Fran is. Like, who did she pick to be a donor? And Maxwell says, I think it's me. And then Sylvia's like, well, you could do a lot worse. She could do
Mm-hmm.
a lot worse. But Fran comes home at that time, and immediately Sylvia is just talking about like how her unmarried daughter's wanting to have a baby. And Fran's like, well, I'm unmarried, it may never happen otherwise. Well, I'm dead now. Do what you want.
Yep.
And then again, Sylvia's like, don't you know how hard it is, for a kid without a father? And Fran's like, yeah, I haven't seen dad since, the cable came to Flushing. And Sylvia like tells Max, well, yeah, he loves the Spice Channel. He learns it. He learned a few things. And they're both like, uh. And then she tries a different approach with Fran. Don't you know how long it takes to get your figure back? And she's like kind of gesturing to herself. And Fran goes, 32 years, which surprised me that she would kind of indicate.
Her possible age.
Yes. And so anyway, again, they let's see. Oh, I don't need you anymore.
Yeah, so Sylvia starts saying, darling, you don't know what it's like to take care of a little one. You're used to grown kids.
Oh, 3 don't need you. Oh, yes. And then, you don't know what it's like to take, you just have 3 who don't need you anymore, and Fran's like, "Can you, like, knock it off with the 'don't need you' anymore?"
Lay off, ma, as
Yeah.
in lay off the unneeded nanny.
Yes. Yes, because obviously she doesn't wanna give Maxwell any ideas to,
Right.
like, fire her because she's unneeded. Um, so yeah. So then Sylvia catches on though and says to Maxwell, "They would be lost without her."
Mhm.
Anyway, at that moment, Monica Baker comes again, and Sylvia's like, "Oh, I get stopped on the street and they say that I look like you." And then Fran like takes her away. "No, that's Tammy Faye Baker." Um, and whenever Monica Baker shows up, she's actually holding a child, and it turns out it's hers, the one that she mentioned before, and his nanny is sick. So, she couldn't possibly leave him behind. And then Fran offers, "Well, I could watch him." Okay. And like immediately hands Zach over to her. And then Monica says to Zach, "Mommy loves you, but the public loves mommy." And again, they this is Fran's opportunity to take care of a young child. And her first kind of inquiry is, "Do you like SpaghettiOs?" To which Zach, no.
Mhm. Yep.
Is there anything you want to add in this?
I just want to finish the line for Monica. Mommy loves you, but the public loves mommy, so she has to go. Um,
Hmm.
she didn't even let Fran uh, finish offering to take care of Zach. Fran was like, "Well, if you want, I'd be happy." And like,
Yeah.
she doesn't even have to say to take care of him. And Monica just like thrusts the baby on her.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
yeah. So the next scene is fairly short, kind of disjointed, if you will.
Yes.
So we cut to Fran in the kitchen with Zach and the SpaghettiOs. Um, and from the look of things, Zach doesn't actually like eating SpaghettiOs. Fran was
Mm.
wearing a white frilly shirt, which is now covered in tomato sauce and other SpaghettiO remnants. And Fran says to him, "You know what? I'm full." And she daintily, dabs at her face, even though she's still, again, her face, her shirt, she's covered in SpaghettiOs.
Mhm.
Um, and so I kind of counted this all as one because it's, again, short and disjointed.
Yep.
Um, Fran, next we cut to him being in like one of those little kitty cars that kids power with their feet. Um,
Mhm.
and she hands him his bottle and says, "Here you go. Don't drink and drive, honey." And she sits down on the couch, puts her feet up, and like turns on her soap. And we see Zach in his little feet doing kind of like Fred Flintstone, da 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 da
Mhm.
da. And he starts driving around the house, and Fran realizes she needs to chase him, and so she hops up and does chase him. And then it's kind of the like the physical humor of her chasing him chasing her, them both chasing Niles, vice versa. Um, in her chasing Zach, she ends up knocking over a vase in the foyer. Um, and the kid's driving rampantly, if you will. And he's only stopped by Cece, who bends over and says, "Coochie, coochie, coo."
Mhm. And
Do
he
you,
screamed.
he screams, yes. Um, do you want to add anything else, or do you want to take us to her bedroom? Or did you
Nope.
consider that part of the same scene?
I'll take it to the bedroom.
Perfect.
So we are now in Fran's bedroom and she's singing Rockabye Baby, but every time she says a line, he's like kind of like crying, moving around, like upset. And every time she stops singing, he quiets down like immediately. So she keeps trying to get through it, and like even like at the very end, quickly says the last couple lines,
Right.
omitting I think the last word maybe. But then, she's like, "Oh, you want to cuddle?" Because he doesn't want her to leave. And she's like, "Okay." And then she starts singing again, and he immediately is upset. And she's like, "Sorry." And so they're basically just cuddling in her room. And there's not much else to that unless you have something to add.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Okay. So take us to the kitchen.
So Monica's there to pick up Zach, and she says, well, I hope he wasn't too much trouble. And Fran's like, oh, not at all. She's like handing him off, and Monica's getting ready to leave, and then Monica does leave. And leaves Fran and Maxwell in the kitchen. And Fran says to him, you should have seen him driving around in his little car all over the house. I think she asks after, that vase in the foyer, and he's like, oh, you mean the Picasso? She's like, oh, wasn't he cute? And just like
Mhm.
doesn't mention that it broke. And he compliments her, saying, you look good with the baby, Miss Fine. And she says, oh, thanks. You should hire me as your nanny and pay me $500 a week, and I'll quit my old job. I'll tell you, this was the greatest day of my life. Do you know, I taught him a new word, entomins. And he's like, so I suppose your mind is made up about having a child. She's like, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to have one right now. What? Yeah, when I put little Zachy to sleep, he was lying there looking so precious. I looked around and there was no one to share it with. And Maxwell's like, I know what you mean. And she says, well, I tell you, I admire women that do it alone, but at the end of the day, I want his daddy to come home so I can put the baby in his arms and say, your turn, here, your turn. I'm playing Mahjong. And he says, well, I must say that I'm relieved. She's like, why? What do you have to do with it? And he's like, well, you were going to ask me to. And she's like, wait a minute. Do you think I was going to ask you to be the father? Ha! And he's like, I most certainly did not. And you could do a lot worse. And
Mhm.
she's like, oh, Mr. Sheffield, are you feeling hurt? Are your feelings hurt that I wasn't going to ask you? And he's like, no. And she's like, come on, you're my boss. I'm your
Oh,
nanny. You know, what were you going to do? Pay me to take care of our kid? Wait, this could work out. No, no, it would be too weird. If you want to have a baby with me, Maxwell Sheffield, you're just going to have to do it the old fashioned way. Marry you? Yeah, that too. And I believe that's the episode.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add?
No, I do not. Just that he was pouty when he said no.
Yeah, no.
No.
Um, yeah, so is there anything you want to talk about holistically before we jump into our shticks?
So like I'm assuming then Sylvia just went home? Like she was distracted by Monica Baker? I don't know. Did you have
That is
any?
an interesting point. I mean, she very well could have gone into the kitchen, had lunch, and then left. Like she didn't
Mhm.
need to watch Fran watch Zach.
Yeah. The only thing too I noticed, and we can kind of talk about this, it kind of leads into favorite fashion. She had a couple of different outfits on when she was watching Zach.
She did.
So kind of then going into that shtick, I don't understand why she had changed because I don't think she was wearing that frilly white top when she offered, right?
She was not. No, she was wearing like a blue, purple, green, like dress suit.
Hmm. So
I
again, it wouldn't be my first choice to put on a white top if I know I'm going to be feeding
no,
it lunch to a child.
no. I mean, I guess as you say that, you're right. Like, why would she change so many times? And the only thing that comes to mind is like he spilled something on her, or he was a messy eater, or not eater, as we saw with spaghettios. So like she kept having to change.
Hmm.
But you're right. It does seem like there are a lot of costume changes.
Hmm.
I did without the spaghettios. I did rather like her white shirt.
Hmm.
Um, the spaghettios, I don't think are going to come out. So I think
Yeah,
that shirt is done.
gone. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. Don't wear white around messy eaters like that.
Especially when you're doing like spaghettios.
Yeah, something that can easily be flung.
Well, and that now reminds me that last episode was also a SpaghettiOs reference
Uh huh.
with the
Yeah.
it's spelled Hello Dolly.
Mm-hmm. And that was a much more civilized use of spaghettios.
Mhm. Yep. So did you have any favorite outfits?
I actually kind of liked what she was wearing while she was cuddling Zach and preventing him from falling asleep by singing. It was like her typical black leggings, black long sleeve shirt, and then a colorful vest with flowers. I think that's my favorite. Did you have a favorite?
I don't think so. I was more like noticed, like I said, that there were a lot of outfit changes within a
Mhm.
short amount of time.
Yeah,
Again,
that's fair.
I kind of liked again the white top without spaghetti yolk.
You mean you also don't want to wear food as part of your
Nope,
attire?
no, not particularly.
What a crazy idea.
I know.
Um, what did you think of her outfit when she goes to talk to Maxwell about her idea of becoming a single mom? It's like that orange and red and black and like
Oh, and
disjointed
it's like
outfit.
yeah, it's like kind of a patchwork, like different
Uh-huh.
things. It seemed very fall to me, like
It
autumn
did.
vibe, but also like not my favorite. So
Yeah,
I
I'm not a big fan, but I agree. It felt very fall.
yes. Hmm.
Is there any other fashion you want to talk about?
Uh, I don't think so. What about you?
I'm good.
Okay.
Notable New Yorkers.
Yes. Um, so again, we start out, there's not, there's just a reference to like Vicks in the first scene.
Yep.
Oh,
Vicks
Vicks.
Vapor Rub,
Yep.
which was actually created to treat a young Smith Richardson severe case of croup. And then it began being sold commercially in 1894. That's
Hmm.
according to Vicks.com. I didn't know it was that old, which is
Mm,
why I mention it.
yeah. And then there, Fran makes the reference to a chia pet.
An American terracotta figurine. They're American terracotta figurines on which chia sprouts are grown in order to resemble fur or hair. That's according to Wikipedia.
Hmm. Lhasa Apso. I totally butchered that pronunciation.
Lhasa Apso is a confident, small, and comical dog breed recognized by the AKC in 1935, which has actually been around for, I think, 1,000 years. And it used to serve, those dogs were used as sentinels in Himalayan monasteries and palaces. And that's according to our friends at akc.org.
Hmm. And then Charlton Heston.
An American actor and political activist who appeared in over 100 films during his 60-year career, most notably as Moses in the Ten Commandments. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm. Now, Monica Baker is made up in this universe, but the actress is real. It's
Yes,
Donna.
she is not played by a fictional person. She is a
Mhm.
fictional person. Um, yes, Donna Dixon. She's an American actress and model who is best known for her role on the show Bosom Buddies. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. And actually, when she and Fran first have a conversation, there's mention that Donna Dixon or Monica Baker has been with the Baldwin brothers, who we've talked about before.
Yes, and fairly recently.
Hmm. The Bridges.
I didn't know who she was referencing there. And
Well,
I
I
got a
know
lot of
they're
different results, so I wasn't sure which one to pick.
like, I assume Jeff Bridges, but I don't know if he has a brother. Hold on.
I do not know.
Let's look at our handy dandy.
Uh,
Oh, he has a brother, Bo Bridges.
okay.
I'm just gonna assume it's Jeff Bridges, who is an American actor, and his brother, Bo Bridges.
Perfect.
So, uh,
Then there's
and
the Sheen brothers,
yep, the Sheen brothers. I'm
Charlie
assuming.
Sheen,
Yep. Hmm.
Raymond Estevez, and Emilio Estevez, I
That's
believe.
who I assumed as well.
Okay,
Yep.
good. That's from our friends on Wikipedia, I believe.
Yeah. So
Yes.
all actors, and then of course Brad Pitt and
So
Johnny Depp.
yes, we talked
Film.
about Brad Pitt previously.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Depp is an American actor who's known for roles such as um, for his roles in Pirates of the Caribbean, A Nightmare on Elm Street, 21 Jump Street, Edward Scissorhands, and Sleepy Hollow. And that's according to our friends at IMDb.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Fran's talked about Watchers a bunch.
Yep.
Uh, so we are familiar with that. Um, Mayflower, the Mayflower.
An English ship which carried the pilgrims from England to Massachusetts and also part of a traditional favorite childhood joke, which I'm more than willing to tell.
More than willing to tell?
I'm more than willing to tell if you want to indulge
Oh,
me.
oh, yep, go for it.
If April showers bring Mayflowers, what do Mayflowers bring? Pilgrims.
Pilgrims. Yep. Um, I'm assuming, like, okay, so we see an exterior shot of where the bank is located. It's City Center Mall. Didn't know if that was actually like legitimate.
Not that I'm not that I'm aware of by that name, but there are a
Okay.
lot of different malls.
And then Siemens Furniture Showroom.
Former furniture store.
Yep. Uh, now was Der Wiener Schnitzel an actual place?
I believe it is. So according to wienerschnitzel.com, Wiener Schnitzel is the world, and I quote, the world's largest hot dog chain with over 50 years of proven success. It was founded in 1961 in Southern California and now sells over 120 million hot dogs annually.
Wow.
Seems like a lot of hot dogs.
And then we have Hickory Farms.
A company founded in 1951 that sells curated gifts and gourmet food, including meats, cheeses, and desserts. That's according to our friends at hickoryfarms.com.
Okay. Now, this seemed like a reference, but I don't know to what. The
Okay.
Listen Hazel.
I didn't know either.
Because like she laughs like maniacally after saying, "Listen, Hazel."
So I think, according to our friends at Wikipedia, Hazel was an American sitcom, and I quote, about a spunky live-in maid named Hazel Burke
Oh,
and
okay.
her employers, the Baxters.
Okay. So that would at least that's probably what
I
they were
think
talking
so.
about. Because then she asks if there's something for him to dust off.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have another Bewitched reference.
We have multiple Bewitched references.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Samantha having Tabitha.
yep. Then I don't know why Darren never let her use her powers.
Mm-hmm.
But it was better sucking up to Larry Tate for a raise. I was with Endora on that one. All of
Mm-hmm.
those are referencing Bewitched. Those are all characters on Bewitched. Samantha's daughter with Darren is Tabitha. Larry was Darren's boss, and Endora was Samantha's mother.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about Bewitched before.
Yes. Yes. And then okay, was the Spice Channel a real thing?
Oh, I didn't look that up,
Okay.
but I think so.
Yes.
According to our friends at Wikipedia, there's the Spice Networks, which are a group of pay-per-view channels for adult materials that first launched in March 1994, originally by
Okay.
Playboy Enterprises specifically.
Yeah. Tammy Faye Baker.
Real person,
Yep.
an American author, evangelist, talk show host, television personality, and singer known for the televangelist program she co-founded with her husband. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. We have SpaghettiOs again this week, like we did last week.
Yep.
And yeah, go ahead.
The Schuberts. So like when Monica comes in with Zach, Max was like, "Why do you have your child? Why do you have your child here? We're going to was it lunch with the Schuberts?" I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a reference to the Schubert organization, which, according to their webpage, is America's oldest professional theater company, and has owned hundreds of theaters and produced over 500 plays and musicals. During the past 30 years, they have dedicated much of their resources and energies to a long-term campaign to revitalize American theater. That's
Cool.
according to Schubert's website.
Yep. And you mentioned again when baby Zach is going around in his car, he kind of makes the Flintstones, um, like the Fred Flintstones power up for the car.
Yeah, Fred Flintstone was the main character on The Flintstones, which was an animated sitcom, which I believe was also the first sitcom to show a married couple sleeping in the same bed.
Oh, really?
I
Interesting.
believe I've heard that before.
Interesting. Rockabye Baby.
Yeah, I did not actually look it up, but
It's a lullaby.
yes.
Same with she starts singing lullaby. And good night. So, there's various lullabies.
Right.
And
Traditionally sung for small children.
yep. And again, there's a reference to the Picasso.
Yeah, we've talked about Picasso before.
hmm Now, how do you pronounce? Well, okay, first there's the Entenmann's.
Entenmann's, it's a baked good company. A yummy baked goods company. According to Entenmann's.com, they offer over 100 different options. They have things such as chocolate frosted donuts, crumb donuts, glazed poppums, apple snacks. Yeah, they have a lot of good things. And I want to say they're kosher. Like I want to say they're certified kosher. But
And then how do you pronounce the game?
Mahjong.
Okay.
I'm definitely not pronouncing it exactly right because I know that I'm not doing it, but I cannot do it better.
Fair enough.
Thank you for not making me try it again.
Do you have anything else?
There was a reference to an Epilady Jr.,
Oh yeah.
which according to Epilady USA, and I quote, in 1986, Epilady brought the first epilator to the market and revolutionized hair removal, offering a cost-effective, mess-free alternative to shaving and waxing for women around the world. There's also a reference to Saks, which I think we've talked about before. It's a luxury department store with its flagship in Manhattan. And then I think I'm out.
Okay. So Yiddish cop.
All right. So we've got a couple things. I'm going to start with Jews and Mahjong because we just talked about it. So, and I'm going to quote from our friends at My Jewish Learning. From the tenements of New York City to the bungalows of the Catskills and the vast American suburbs, Jewish women have kept alive a game that otherwise fell out of fashion in the 1920s. Apparently, they have this really detailed article about the relationship between Jews and Mahjong, including how there are multiple theories as to how exactly this game that originated in China became so popular with Jews. But notably in 1937, a group of Jewish women created the National Mahjong League, and that league still exists. And as I said, there are multiple theories for why it's so popular, which if anyone's interested, I highly recommend reading My Jewish Learning's article on the topic, because I don't think I can do it justice. So there's that. More substantively, the whole premise of this episode about Fran wanting to have a baby, it's not just that the family is very important in Judaism, but it's also the first mitzvah, the first commandment, the first like good thing you're supposed to do that's listed in the Torah is to be fruitful and multiply. This is considered satisfied if you have one boy and one girl. What's kind of interesting is that while there's a lot of pressure, as we've heard from Sylvia to Fran, trying to get her to have a baby, the mitzvah actually only applies to men. Women are exempt from all time-based mitzvot. Because the Talmud, the Torah, everything was written, Talmud, I should say, not the Torah. Because all of these things were written by men for men, like women don't get the same attention, and the mitzvah only technically falls to men. But interestingly, rabbis are able to give dispensation or, basically tell people it's okay to delay the mitzvah for various reasons. So like, yeah, if like you wanted to like, get a better, like be more established in your career, wait a little bit longer, or you have a health issue or some other reason that you don't want to, be fruitful and multiply right now, rabbis will give you private rulings and say it's okay for now, it's okay, come back in a year, come back 6 months, etc. So that's one. Second, and I think more interesting, is the whole idea about, Fran asks, does the sperm bank have any Jewish guys? And that's actually an issue in Israel where they don't have enough Jewish sperm. And so there are a couple different things I want to talk about. So first off, the reason there's like a dearth of Jewish sperm available is because there's actually a prohibition on masturbation for men under Jewish law.
I think
So
you mentioned that like before.
I might have. So yeah, there's also apparently a number of rabbis have, according to an article by the Forward, a number of rabbis have actually determined that if you're going to use a sperm donation, it should be done with non-Jewish sperm in order to avoid the risk of possible incest later down, such as children unknowingly marrying siblings years later.
Wow.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, which is an interesting thing that they've thought about. And for the record, there's no there's no concern about the children not being Jewish if you're not using Jewish sperm because of traditional matrilineal descent, meaning that Judaism would be passed down through the mother.
Mhm.
The reform movement in the United States has moved away from that, and they basically say Judaism can be passed down by either parent with open practice. But in more traditional circles, it's still matrilineal descent. And the reason that rule exists in the first place is you always know who the mother is.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, um, I think I think that's it. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Okay. Would you like to do some 90s nostalgia?
Yes. Um, so again, I I feel like it felt a little dated to me when Sylvia referred to herself as an illegitimate grandmother.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. I mean, did you have a similar thought?
I think so. I also think sort of Fran and Val's conversation about, possible embarrassment and like people being shocked if you just show up pregnant. I think society has liberalized in that regard, at least somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It just feels different these days, I would say.
Mhm.
Um, obviously there's a lot more people who have children out of wedlock. Um, because some people are even choosing not to get married, and
Mhm.
so yeah, I feel like to that extent, like the illegitimate kind of thing doesn't seems a bit dated, if that makes sense.
Mhm. No, I agree.
So I feel like too with the mailed birth announcement, I've
Yes.
maybe had like one or two, but for the most part, people usually announce it via social media or like
Mhm.
email or something like that. You don't really get as much mailed out these days.
Right.
Say, what about you?
I'm just gonna say old cars. Um,
Yep.
and then I'm gonna also add when they're at the sperm bank, the fact that they had a physical book of donors instead of an online database that she would be able to, log into and peruse on her own. To me,
Mm-hmm.
that felt very dated.
Mm-hmm. Um, like the intercom situation, I feel like um you wouldn't necessarily have the same because like people might be calling Maxwell first of all not on the landline, but his cell phone, in which
Hmm.
case he can look at that himself, or he could have just texted Niles, like if anybody calls the home phone, or
Hmm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I didn't think of that as dated. I mean, I don't have an intercom or a butler, but I would imagine it would still be. I imagine it would still be
I
helpful to be
don't
able to
either,
communicate.
for the record.
I just figured it would be helpful to like be able to communicate in that fashion.
Yeah, but obviously there's a way that he can listen in to the office.
True.
If he just uses the red button.
Which I do find it sort of hard to believe that he didn't know that already.
Hmm.
That feels to me like a rookie mistake. And
Yeah.
Niles is clearly not a rookie.
Yep. Anything else?
No, I'm out.
Okay. So then, do we have some feature fun?
Not as much as we usually do, unfortunately. Um, so as we kind of talked about last week, Morty and Sylvia got married because we find out later that Sylvia was pregnant.
Mhm.
So Fran's suggestion that she was conceived via artificial insemination, no, it doesn't work. Um, and also next week, Fran is actually going to walk in on her parents. I believe it's next week. Fran's actually going to walk in on her parents, not trying to conceive via artificial insemination.
Mm-hmm.
So her ideas of her parents' chastity are burned into her corneas, shall we say. This is not the only time that people consider getting pregnant. This is not the only time. There's actually a pregnancy scare in season 6. I won't say who it involves. There's multiple pregnancy scares. I'm going to speak vaguely, and multiple pregnancy type things in season 6. And that's all I'll say.
Okay.
All right. Time to rate the episode.
Yep.
I think it's your turn.
It is my turn first.
I love when it's your turn.
Yeah. Except for the times when you're okay with it being your
Exactly. Exactly.
So, so there were a couple of things that I think I mentioned along the maybe not. Like, okay, like you don't need to give a hairy baby. It's a baby, an epilepsy. But those little Weight Watchers, all that kind of comments. But still, I will say I'm giving it a 5. Because it was fun to see the misunderstanding. And I also feel like that topic is very real. Like
Mm-hmm.
is like that kind of conversation you might have as you get older. And if you've always thought and wanted to have children, but you're not yet at a stage where you're in a relationship with intentions of marriage or not, some people again don't choose to get married. Um, whether or not you're going to go forward with it on your own. And then what are the considerations, pros and cons, that kind of stuff. So I think it's a very kind of real topic, even though it's done in a sitcom.
Right.
So
I'm just going to add to your comment. That's actually something that is dated. Fran says that she's concerned about her eggs expiring when she starts to look like her mother. I don't think that she's actually worried about them expiring. I think she's then worried about attracting Mr. Right to, use the eggs. But I think now she would have the option of freezing her eggs, because commercial egg freezing, so egg freezing for people who are not going to lose their fertility due to medical conditions or medical treatments, it was no longer considered experimental as of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but also might depend. I don't know how much the cost of it.
A lot of money.
Yeah, and so Fran, who apparently makes less than $500 a week, if she's willing to quit, presumably for a better paying job of $500 a week, there's an economical kind of thing in there as well.
No, that is true. Egg freezing is not for everyone. It is pricey and it is grueling. But I'm just saying that would be at least something that would get mentioned today, I think, instead of just jumping to artificial insemination, which also would probably cost something.
Yeah. And, so obviously too, just in general, technology has advanced in different ways since the 90s, I assume.
Right.
But still, I think there is still that question of, yeah, I don't care what other people think, but do I want to do this by myself or not? If that makes sense.
Right. It's an undertaking, whether you have a partner or not.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting conversation. And what's funny is last week we had the whole thing about marriage. And of course, in the old, first comes love, then comes marriage. Now we're talking about babies in this episode, right after the episode about marriage. And again, both of those, not right now.
Well, actually, it's funny to me. I actually take it back. We'll see. Fran will walk in on her parents in 2 weeks, not next week. But next week we actually go to a bris, which is how the Jewish community welcomes babies and male babies into the world, into the community. So
yeah,
love, marriage, baby, bris.
Exactly. So I have a feeling I know what you're going to give it, but
Yeah,
go ahead. Unless,
I'm giving it a 5. I
yeah.
love this episode. It makes me happy. Um, I love the misunderstanding. I love how Fran was literally just going to Maxwell because she values his opinion, and he understands her valuing his
Input.
exactly. He understands her valuing his input as being the actual like providing of swimmers to make a baby.
Yeah.
Um, I love this. I love the fertility aspect of it. You're right, it does feel very real. These are concerns, and I think those concerns about for people who want to have biological children, the like timing concerns are somewhat universal, and those just transcend time because like there always going to be questions about like, is this the right time, is this not the right time,
Mm-hmm.
is this something I should do, is this something I should not do, is this something I should do by myself, is it something I should wait for Mr. Right or Miss Right or whoever to
Mm-hmm.
be there with me, kind of like you were saying. um I love this episode. I think it's delightful. So yeah, definitely gets a 5, just like last week.
Okay. Anything else you want to discuss before we wrap up?
uh I think I have two things.
Okay.
um I realized during our notable New Yorkers segment we didn't mention the canty mouse. That's the mouse that
Oh.
had what looked like a human ear growing on his back. I remember being in like elementary school and reading about they grew a human ear on the back of the mouse. And so I wanted to know what year they did it. According to our friends at Wikipedia, it was 1996.
Oh, wow.
So it was like right on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
So there was
Or the
that.
back.
Or the back. Aha. Yes. And I feel like I had one other thing I wanted to. Oh, um, I will just comment as like a bigger picture thing. I don't think the way they portrayed Fran trying to get a sperm donor was accurate. So I feel like you wouldn't just like be able to walk into a sperm bank and they'd hand you a book and be like, "Is there one you like?" I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's not how that works.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to mention that. Um, yeah. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited the nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 59, The Unkindest Cut.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at findtimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.